person who came to Johannesburg with Winnie Mandela Mandela is the chairperson of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, Dr Brigalia Bam. She joins us now from our Pretoria studios. Good evening, Mama. Thanks very much for joining us this evening. Your thoughts after hearing of the passing of Winnie Mandela Mandela?
I was extremely very shocked and very disturbed. It's always a shock to hear of someone's death. We knew Winnie had not been well, and we all as human beings expect that at some point our journey will end. But there she was, leaving us. A great tree has fallen for one of our generation. And a person like Winnie, who had a special kind of journey. Winnie, was a person I got to know when we were all in our 20s, when we were all studying to become social workers in this city. And Winnie, like all of us, was coming from a background of a rural community, but also communities that cared for people, and communities that in some ways were centered around the people. That is what happens if you grow up in a village. And Winnie, though she did train as a social worker, she never really changed in all her long life. Her commitment of caring for people, her greatest commitment of justice. You know, Winnie in some ways was very unfortunate, but fortunate because she managed to keep her own identity as Winnie. She was a wife for a very short time, so she didn't have the luxury of always talking about my husband, thinks that my husband is that. And what is interesting about Winnie's life is that her own courage as a person and her own integrity as a person and commitment to people. Yes, the line is thin between commitment to the struggle and commitment to people. But wherever Winnie was in all those long years of her work as a social worker, and was given one of the most interesting areas of work in social work, what we called medical social work, in a hospital which was the biggest hospital in Southern Africa, if not the biggest hospital in the world, which is Baragwanath Hospital. And as a young social worker, really set amazing standards of professionalism in a very, very difficult environment, which has always been difficult, but it was during the days of apartheid for many people, those patients coming in and out of Baragwanath, having nowhere to return to, some of them having to return to their homes as quickly as possible because their time of being in Johannesburg was very short. And some of the people having difficulties in even being admitted because they did not belong to Johannesburg. So it was at that time that these were not just patients who are normal patients in any normal country, but that was the kind of challenge Winnie had and remained faithful to her profession for a very long time. Winnie's journey, like all the journeys of women, and like all the journeys of people at a particular time in history, was a challenging journey. On the one hand, she was there in her own right, but at the same time, her own right is always there living in a patriarchal society where she represented not only the black people and was sensitive, like all of us. Maybe sensitive is not only the word, to racism, but also Winnie wasn't talking about the struggles of black women. She wasn't only talking about women who are without their husbands for many years because their husbands are incarcerated. She wasn't talking about the parents who have to bring up children on their own without their fathers. She was part of that community. And so she wasn't an outsider to that kind of suffering. She was not an outsider to all the emotions and the deprivations that happen to human beings when they are in that session. And so Winnie always would remember that young people are important. She has a reputation on that, of listening to people, not only people within the African National Congress. Winnie had conversations with people in Unity Movement, and when occasions arose for her to assist them, she did. Winnie would have conversation with young radical people from the Black Consciousness Movement and gave them the moral support. And she was that kind of person who saw the struggle broader than simple party politics. But her politics were always around human beings. If she went to an area, she wouldn't try to identify only members of her party who must be serviced and must be taken care of. She would go to a community and begin to find out what are the things that are worrying people. And she was very much centered around people. Winnie was generous with herself. Winnie was very kind. And Winnie was very giving. She had all those other gifts. You know, being people would think that if a person is, as Winnie was called many times, a revolutionary, and Winnie would probably would lose out some of those the human feelings, the humanness. And you know, Winnie, a fighter, remained very humble, amazing. In spite of the fact that she fought and had courage and would talk back to anyone who violated her. But really, deep down, she remained a very, very humble person. We will miss her very much. We will miss people of her generation.
Now, in your conversations, I would say private conversations or personal conversations with her, what is the one big thing that you will take with you, probably forever?
The greatest thing I will take probably is how Winnie was able to handle pain, and how Winnie was able to handle things that brought her down in life. She was able, in spite of all those things that were a challenge in her own life, she would rise again and would continue to fight. Winnie knew who she was. Winnie never lost her own identity as Winnie. Winnie never lost about what she believed in. And I think that's what I remember about her, that at the worst of times in her life, times of repression, times of rejection, times of confinement and all that went on in her life, Winnie would rise again. She never allowed that she would fall. And what really amazed me about her is that after having gone through a divorce, which like all divorces was a difficult one, especially if one has had a partner for so long away from her. And now finally, after many, many years, they are together. But the long years, the very long years of their separation had a lot of weight on the relationships of maintaining a marriage. But she refused to fall and crawl. She would rise up again. And that is what I'll always remember about Winnie.
What do you think gave her that fighting spirit, or was responsible for her ability to rise up again after every moment that would have destroyed a lot of people?
I think Winnie knew who she was. I think Winnie probably, I don't want to generalize, would reflect on who am I. And maybe she would do that exercise in her own life. And when everything around her seemed to be falling apart, she has to remember who am I, where do I come from? And I think Winnie's background, where she grew up in that environment of people, in an environment of being in a family that was an important family in that particular context at that particular time, she always remembered who she is and where she comes from. And I think that's probably what in the long years of that long journey kept her to know, who am I, where do I come from, what am I trained to do, what am I committed to doing. And I'm sure that constant reflection on self and what you believe in, and if you believe in human beings and you believe that these human beings are made in God's image and that you are also made in the God's image, maybe that's what helped Winnie to go on and struggle and smile until the end of her life.
Well, on the back of such tragedies as the life acid Dimeni one, I guess that becomes a very important thing to remember about Winnie Mandela Mandela, what you've just said.
Yes. I think in our professions, all of us, and in what we are trained to do, the training is very important for us, but finally it is the principle of those things that you want to abide with. If you are trained as a social worker, the emphasis is people, it's human beings who are in suffering. As a social worker, you don't serve people who have no problems. You normally serve people who are facing all kinds of problems of an emotional nature, problems in community of adjustment, issues of delinquency, issues of broken families, issues of violence against people and against women in particular. So in your daily life, you are trained. But finally, that training you get gives you the principles. And finally, it is the person, how you apply that. And if people who are handling all those patients had just remembered that they are dealing with human beings, they are dealing with people, they are dealing with people who also like to be recognized as human beings, that's fundamental. And I think Winnie was able to really survive, like all of us, you know, in this long journey of survival, being around people, not only around people who are your admirers, the people who look up to you as a leader, but also the opportunity of being around those people who need help, those people who look up to you as a leader, those people who think that when they see you, you are an inspiration, even if you don't give them money. But once they see you, and the fact that Winnie would always go to these communities was very important. Not carrying food parcels, not carrying money, but carrying herself and carrying her love for those people, that they are human beings, and showing that she cares for them because they are important as she was. I think when you reflect back to her life, when we all do so, I think some of us and most people only know her as somebody in the struggle, but you know, there was another Winnie beside the Winnie of the struggle, the Winnie of the marches. Behind that was a human being who cared for other people.
Dr. Bam, thank you very much for talking to us this evening. She is the former chairperson of the Independent Electoral Commission, but also currently the chairperson of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation.